Once upon a time. Welcome to Australian Book Lovers, your destination for imagination.
Welcome, listeners. We are here at a very special Australian Book Lovers podcast. We have our writer's room. Now, you know that at ABL our mission is not only about celebrating and supporting Australian authors and sharing fabulous Aussie and Indigenous authored books of all genres with readers around the globe, but it's about finding fantastic resources and information for authors who want to write their first book, their next book, or a bestseller. Wouldn't it be good? Bestseller would be lovely. And what better resource than getting into the writer's room with some of those authors and asking about their experience. Now, as opposed to like a TV screenplay or, all those kind of writer's rooms, we have two very special guests with us tonight. First of all, I'm Veronica Strachan, aka V.E. Patton, and I'm a fantasy, biography and a picture book writer, and I'm here tonight on Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country. And of course, my co-host, away you go.
Yes, here I am again. So I'm Laurie Bell. I'm a science fiction and fantasy author, Friday fictioneer, reader, flash fiction writer, and your co-host here for the Writers' Lounge. Also coming to you from Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country.
Yep, and we, as you can see from the video, if you're listening to us on YouTube, we have with us two guests. So first of all, Rachel Matthews, welcome to the Writers' Room.
Welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Where are you tonight, Rachel?
So I am in Melbourne and I am coming to you from Wurundjeri land and very privileged to be here.
Excellent, thank you very much. And Michael Fitzgerald is our second guest.
Welcome, Michael.
Where are you tonight, Michael?
Hi, yes. I'm at Birigal land, aka Wallara in Sydney.
Very good. Same time zone, slightly warmer up there, perhaps?
It's a little bit chilly. I think winter's started. Yeah, officially. Yeah. So I'm wearing a puffer jacket.
Oh.
Yeah.
I won't tell you how many layers I've got on, Michael, but there you go. All right, Laurie, to get our listeners in the mood, because of course, our listeners tell us that they really love to hear about the writer's process, about where their story comes from and all those kind of things. So perhaps you could introduce Rachel with a little bit of a bio.
I am going to, sorry, there are my notes. Always be prepared. So Rachel is the Melbourne author of Never Look Desperate, reviewed in The Guardian and The Weekend Australian's Best New Australian Fiction for 2023. More about that in a moment. Never Look Desperate is her third work of adult fiction. Vinyl Inside, her debut novel, was highly commended in the Vogel Awards, and Siren, her second novel, was a part of a PhD examining sexual violence in Australian football culture and received strong press reviews nationwide. On radio and TV, she's had some interesting and fun conversations about challenging the stereotypes of love and intimacy in later life. See www.rachelmatthewsauthor.com. She's also a lecturer at RMIT and ACU universities. Her workshops in bookshops and libraries, Readers Are Writers, are a fun space that cater for everyone. She's been enjoying these in Melbourne and regional areas, and in early May, she's presenting to students at Sydney University.
Yeah, next week.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Because it is, in fact, early May now.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
So it sounds a little bit, Rachel, as though all of your world is writing at the moment. Would that be fair to say? Or is there a whole lot another side of the Rachel Matthews story?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate to enjoy my work. I think it's a real privilege if your work is connected to what you love. And I absolutely love being in writing classrooms because I feel like everybody has something to say. It's just that sometimes people need to feel safe enough to take that step. And for a lot of people, they've never had that encouragement before. And, kind of magical, quite magical things happen in writing classrooms.
Yeah, and in fact, some people have had discouragement from early teachers who feel they're not writing as they should within a format and a structure and boundaries. Yet these days, books and words and, you know, expression is so much more generous and open.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I've been a VCE English teacher, and so I put my hand up as one of the. Maybe it was me, but you know, I think you know, I think people in education have the best of intention, but you know, we meet plenty of people in writing classrooms who've had. It could have even just been a critical parent or even a peer. And that can be enough if you're a pretty sensitive person. That can stamp you with that idea that, you know, I'm not good enough, or I'm not like those other authors, or, you know, the books I look at when I go into a bookshop. And what I love, the reason I run these workshops, and I love especially going out to the country. I grew up in Shepparton, so I've got a bit of a soft spot for regional areas. But I just love to kind of open that up and kind of invite everyone and just say, look, come and have a go and have fun and have a laugh and don't worry about it. And that's when amazing things happen.
Yeah, it's lovely. Just creating that really safe space.
Yeah, it's a joy.
Fantastic. Yeah, sorry. It's my coaching hat on and go, yes, that's what we need. Now, Michael, our other guest,
Yes.
you know, no pressure, but Michael, you grew up in Melbourne and you moved to Sydney. I'm not sure whether I can, you know, forgive you for that, but anyway, let's finish Michael's bio. Moved to Sydney in the early 1990s to work on the Time Warner Inc.'s launch of the celebrity magazine Who. He later became the South Pacific arts editor of Time, and for the past 2 decades has been an art magazine editor, most recently with Art Monthly Australasia. He made his literary debut in 2017 with The Pacific Room, a fictional speculation on Robert Louis Stevenson's travels through Oceania, followed by Pieta 2021, inspired by the restoration of Michelangelo's sculpture. Late is his 3rd novel. So 3 novels, and I can see that, you know, lots of connections. Michelangelo's sculpture, art magazines. Yes. So tell us a little bit about what you do now.
Yeah, so what I do when I'm not writing, which is most of the time, because I you know, time is that great obstacle to all of us. But I have a full-time job as an editor at a museum in Sydney called Powerhouse Museum,
Right.
and so I'm doing all sorts of things like exhibition labels or catalogue, essay editing, or writing for the web, or it's quite a dynamic time at the Powerhouse, where it's going through a lot of change, and a new museum's being built on the Parramatta River.
Right.
That's sort of keeping me really busy, but I'm trying to quarantine my weekends so I can do writing. And I've finished my first short story since writing late, which I finished last year. I finished a short story the other weekend, so I feel very pleased.
Congrats. Yes.
Excellent. Congratulations on that.
Oh,
Always feels good to get them done.
But I was just thinking back to Rachel and universities, because I was suddenly thinking, who taught me, or who was that person? And I was just thinking, I was at Melbourne University, and I was very lucky to have Louise Adler was my Charles Dickens lecturer and tutor, and she was really wonderful, and I love Charles Dickens as a result. But I sort of think back to, but there are people like that you know, do weave into your life and maybe make quite a big impression. Peter Craven also was at university, I think, was a tutor, and yeah, but art has obviously played a part in my more recent writing, and there is a thread through of art and design, architecture and film in my latest book. But it's very much the 3 books, I think, are sort of connected by looking out from Australia at the sort of the idea of, are we on a periphery, or are we at the edge of a culture, or are we actually, you know, immersed and engulfed in a culture that we, you know, I guess my books have been reckoning with that kind of question.
Fascinating.
Laurie, I've been hogging the questions.
No, my mind is abuzz with so many different questions, actually. I guess with both of you, and we can start with maybe yourself, Michael, and jump to Rachel. Where did you really get that buzz to write?
Yeah, I think from school days. I had some amazing English teachers that were very encouraging, and I think I entered a short story competition in my second year of high school, and I won a short story competition with the Australian where it got published. It was just observations of being on the beach on my school holidays, and it made it into a short story, and so something like that you get a bit of encouragement from, and then school takes over, and then university takes over. But I was always writing, and always trying to, and then novels are a huge kind of black hole of time, and I get
Yes.
yes, as we all know, and but I guess the buzz is really also I worked as a journalist in the meantime, and there's nothing like seeing words that you've written in print, and I think it's just it's almost like a sort of nicotine rush, the smell of ink for me, and so I think that's what you just go for, that next fix, I guess.
Yep.
Ink fix. Yeah.
What about yourself, Rachel?
Well, my inspiration's not as intellectual as sounding as Michael's, because I mean, I remember writing a poem when I was about 7 about the shaggy haggy dog. I mean, it's dreadful, right? But apparently it got pinned on the wall, I remember, and in class. And I like making stuff up. I just like I like going somewhere else. It's kind of nice. And the big turning point in year 9, a friend and I got fixated on, we used to create love boat stories where in these stories, and we would have sleepovers together, we'd be up all night. And what we would do is use guys that we had crushes on at the local tech school, and they'd be all on the love boat. And of course, when we left the love boat, we were all married.
Of course. Yep.
And some of us might have even dated the doctor. I don't know. Might have been underage. I don't really want to talk about it. But maybe I can take the love boat, getting my career going.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And I think it was the only thing I ever paid attention to at school. I don't know. I think most creative people have reports saying did not pay attention, or
dreamy, or needs to focus more, or
talks too much.
More love boat stories at school. Yeah, but I mean, I've always, and I do have a really beautiful, very precious memory of going to the library with my dad at a very young age in Shepparton, in those really, those old libraries that had that smell of books, and it was beautiful and cool. It was an old sort of Art Deco building, and just sitting down in that quiet and just jumping into those worlds and the imagination. So I don't think that ever leaves, once you get that taste for it.
Yeah, I think you're right. Veronica, do you want to jump in there, or?
Yeah, I was just thinking of going to the Coburg Library. I came from a large family, and so not many books at our place, and down to the library. I remember finding The Hobbit, which was was a very early edition, being my age, and it was just like, what? Yeah. There's this whole other world within these pages, and that was the end of me. That was just the way you go. Yeah. Michael, let's come back to the threads that are in your stories, because I know you both, being third book, there's been the opportunity, and people often find that as they think, I'll write a different book, but the same kind of thread or experience weaves its way through the story somehow. Now, Michael, you mentioned sort of art, and Australia being, are we on the border? Are we, a real art country? Tell me a little bit more about that and what the thread is. Or perhaps should I give you the blurb for Late so people know what Late is about? Perhaps we'll do that first.
Oh, yeah.
So Late, the blurb is, an American actress renowned for being late. Oops, sorry, I've just moved that and completely missed it. Let me try that one more time. That wasn't very clever at all. Late, an American actress renowned for being late, is living with her two cats in a modernist clifftop apartment in Sydney in the late 1980s. The recounting of her story is prompted by the arrival of an old typewriter and a book addressed to Zelda Zonk, and by the arrival of a young man called Daniel, who is locked out while house-sitting her neighbour's apartment. Together, Zelda and Daniel form an unlikely but close bond as they go walking, prepare dinner for Shabbat, traverse Sydney Harbour on a ferry, and talk about their lives. Part of their bond is the discovery that they are both orphans. Daniel is also an habitué of the nearby sandstone cliffs where men have mysteriously gone missing. In Late, Michael Fitzgerald superbly captures the literary spirit and sensibility of an ageing woman and icon who has escaped celebrity. It is a haunting and lyrical novel about art, friendship, and confronting our fears. A big swing that works beautifully. Fitzgerald's affection and respect for his subject, whom we all know and don't know at all, results in a voice that rings true, warm, tender, passionate, smart, self-aware, and very, very witty. And that was a comment by C.J. Johnson, president of the Film Critics Circle of Australia.
That's fantastic.
Deeply referential, dramatic and elusive, Late balances on a tightrope between present and past lives, public and private roles. A riveting mystery unfolds. In the process, the author delivers a meditation on celebrity and a love song to Sydney. That's from Catherine Phil McCarthy, author of Daughters of the House and One Room and Everywhere.
Wow.
Michael,
Wow.
that's impressive, Michael.
Yes.
Really. And beautifully. I don't know if you did your blurb, but that's fantastic.
It was good. No, I can remember reading it though, and almost falling off my chair. But yeah, it's a very different book. I think Late to my first two, and it's the first one I've written in first person, and it is in the actress's voice, which was a kind of a big step for me. And but yeah, I was trying to think of the thing that links the three. My first Robert Louis Stevenson was sort of almost looking out to the Pacific from Australia and wondering why we don't really imaginatively engage with the Pacific. And Robert Louis Stevenson famously died in Samoa. And so the book is set in Samoa. The second book, Pieta, was inspired by a crazy act by an Australian who vandalised the Michelangelo sculpture in the early 1970s, where he attacked it with a hammer. And the book sort of uses that as a way. It was a book about a mother and daughter, really, but it's a way that I use that to bring them together. Their stories are kind of connected by this event. And then Late, again, well, I suppose it's this actress looking out from her clifftop apartment, but back to America, where she's from, and she is probably one of the most iconic actresses of the 20th century. Zelda Zonk was her name that she used when she wanted to be anonymous. And it is based on a very famous blonde actress, probably the most famous blonde actress you could think of in Hollywood, who died in 1962. But I imagine her as going on living. She did convert to Judaism in her third marriage, and I imagine her living on as a Jewish writer in Sydney in the 1980s, where she's going through middle age and has to face some dark things happening outside her window. But it was I can sort of see a thread there, but it's also a bit of a stepping off point for me as a writer as well. It's quite surreal and dark, but also I hope a little bit comic. And I guess and that's another maybe a thing that might connect us, Rachel and I too, as well as our publisher. That I've yet to read your latest book, Rachel, but I have a palpable sense that there's a sense of humour going on in your book, and I hope readers of my book will find a humour and a wit, because the actress that it was based on was incredibly funny and also quite melancholic and tragic. But I see her life as quite a triumph, and it's my way of actually respecting her in a way that perhaps she was never fully respected in her lifetime. So yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell. But it's it's still freshly in my mind. I only finished writing it early last year, and I feel I still haven't quite got her out of my system yet.
Yeah, it's sort of still living with
do
her.
that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. What about you, Rachel? Tell us about the threads in your story.
Well, I was just thinking, Michael, when you said there's the 80s and cats, you've already got me.
Yeah, same.
and also about women being celebrated and women later in life being celebrated. And I'm really looking forward to your book as well. And and I was just thinking before, sometimes you're not always conscious of these themes that you keep digging into. And in class, we often talk about, trying to work out what our own vulnerabilities are and what are the things that perplex us or that we like to celebrate or that make us angry, And so I think there is a definite theme in all three books of isolation, but I've just started to realize that the characters who are isolated don't fit probably some of those stereotypes about what does it mean to be isolated and who is isolated in society. And a lot of the time, I think there are many misconceptions about or perhaps terrible tropes about loneliness. And also it can be an invisible thing. Those people at work, those people in the coffee shop that will always say they're fine, and then we hear about something that happens, particularly with men, which was a real focus in my research with the Siren book, which had football as a young woman. And of course, once I started to research about men and violence and some of the struggles, it became not just about football, but really about not feeling heard and not being able to live up to these exhausting codes of what it means to be a man, what it means to be worthwhile, what it means for a young woman to feel that she has a place in the world. And so all my characters are just, I guess they're all just trying, like all of us, to be understood. And I like to bring a bit of humor in too. Michael was talking about the tragic and the comedy, and I think life is that, isn't it? We've got to kind of acknowledge that, which is what I love about that kind of Fleabag kind of narrative. Yeah. So I think isolation, but also I like to have a bit of fun too, because I think as readers, I know I like to have a bit of respite and just look at the absurdity of stuff, especially at the moment in the world where everything feels just so overwhelming. I think it's good for us to sort of sit in those moments and just kind of look at the colour that is still around us.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's fantastic.
I do have to apologise, Rachel. I forgot to read your blurb, so let me go back to read that. As you can say, we're very
make it up if
spontaneous
you
here.
Just say it was a bestseller.
So I will say I got 2 copies given to me of your book, and I never got to read one of them because people said, "Oh, I want to read that. I want to read that." Okay, all right, off you go. So
third time's the charm.
Third time's the charm. So Rachel's book. Let me just carefully put this in front of the screen so I'm not looking sideways. Rachel's book, her latest book, Never Look Desperate, is Sedaris Meets Fleabag, a dark tragicomedy romance set in Melbourne 2023 about love and intimacy in later life, midlife Tinder and isolation. It features cremation bling, pineapple underwear, grief and vaccinated cruise ships. The central characters Bernard, Goldie and Min are everything TED Talks tells you not to be. The story tackles the absurdity of despair in a recovering world. The Liberation, The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald included Never Look Desperate in their must-read reviews, while The Guardian and Australian featured it in their best new Australian fiction lists. Samala Harris from the Herald Sun Melbourne calls it laugh out loud witty with misty moments. Triple R Book Show and Dimmock's reviewer Melbourne Kerry Window says, my pick of 2023, just gorgeous. Oh, and now I realise the liberation from isolation and the wild frontier of middle-aged Tinder. So that serves me right for trying to copy and paste from an email to put it in there. So I just thought that's really weird. Let me just read that line one more time again. The story tackles the absurdity of despair in a recovering world, the liberation from isolation, and the wild frontier of middle-aged Tinder. Oh my goodness, so sorry, Rachel, but there you go.
I think you could read that line as many times as possible. It's such a
know.
great line.
That's it. And as soon as I said, middle-aged and Tinder,
Marvellous.
that's when I
Yeah.
lost the
Yeah.
thought for that. So I was like, yeah, okay. There you go. So both of you, Rachel and Michael, there's relationships. And, contemporary stories particularly are often about relationships and the strength or the exploration of those. And it's about, Rachel, as you say, vulnerabilities. Well, it's not the writers, but, the characters exploring their vulnerabilities. And it's, we read what we need to learn, or we teach what we need to learn. I can't remember, was it Gloria said one of those things? I can't remember what it was, but that the stretching of relationships and looking at the boundaries and looking at the interactions, I think that's what's fascinating about a good contemporary story. So Michael, in particular, maybe in Late, you've got a middle-aged woman and a young man, obviously in a difficult time in Sydney in that time period. So tell us why that particular relationship is something that you wanted to explore.
Yeah, so they're complete strangers to each other. The young man next door to Zelda Zonk is locked out of his apartment, and he recognizes something in her. She doesn't really explain who she is. She has to reveal who she is over the course of the book to him. But he is a young man. We imagine he may be gay, or he may not be. You get a sense of confusion, perhaps, and also we get a sense he's working on a TV series in Sydney. He's working as a sort of gopher. He's locked out of his apartment. She has a deep maternal instinct that she was never able to have a child herself. She very sort of famously lost a number of babies fairly early on, and they're sort of weirdly drawn to each other. And I guess it's a way for me to explore. They're both orphans as well, but they're both. There's not really it's not sort of defined by their sexuality either. There is maybe a sort of hint of playfulness between the two of them, but they have to once they do get inside, she invites him into her apartment, and then they spend the day together. But he spends a lot of time on the cliffs around Sydney, where at that time quite a few men went missing and were violently thrown to their deaths. And that is sort of a dark backstory that's happening in the as the book unfolds. But yeah, it's one of those relationships that I think you can have, ironically, with a stranger. You can reveal, you sort of have the freedom to probably be yourself. There's no, prescribed family behavior that they had to follow, or any dating, or but they're both, I suppose, aesthetic people. She's from the film world and literary world, and they actually are drawn together. But he needs to write a letter to he's just tracked down his mother in Sydney, who's a hairdresser, and so their assignment is to write her a letter that night, and that's one of the main things that happens, that sort of culminates in a bit of a turning point in the book. But so they're drawn through writing. She was always interested in being a poet. Even when she was the most famous film actress in the world, she wrote poetry. She was married to a very famous playwright. And he, so it's through books that they also come together through the day. And yeah, they end up writing this letter that has literary references and whatnot. But yeah, it's just one of those based on people. Well, I feel as though I know Zelda Zonk through her films, and Daniel was based on someone I knew back in the 80s who was, a very beautiful young man who did die tragically too young. And I just, yeah, it's just one of those relationships that is an unlikely one, but I find the most unlikely relationships the most interesting, what draws people together. And of course, there are two cats involved there as well that do play a pivotal part of the relationship as well, because they're totally unpredictable and wild, and jump into the action at very unexpected times, especially at the climax. Yeah.
Perfect. So we will admit Laurie and I both have two cats. Laurie's got two brand new kittens. Mine are
Brand
a
new
little older,
kittens,
but
and
that's
they
okay.
are as mad as possible. I absolutely believe that they would get involved in the most dramatic moment possible. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. These are blue Burmese, which are almost sort of dog-like as well. But yeah.
Very good.
But they both got literary names. One's called Carson and the other one's called Isaac. Yeah. They're both writers that Zelda knew back in New York. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Rachel. Relationships.
Can I just continue on from something Michael was saying?
Yes.
You know, Michael, I'm always really happy to hear when someone is giving, you know, women a voice in later life. And because what's crazy is that the biggest readers of fiction and the enormous readership of fiction is women in later life, and yet we are not represented enough. It's kind of crazy. And I have friends, writer friends, and I've heard people have experiences where they've had letters sent back saying, you know, look, you know, I don't think anyone's going to be interested in this older woman. And I think we're starting a revolution. I think it's changing. You know, there are lots of fantastic books coming out, and yeah, it's almost like a bit of I won't say backlash, but and also I think what we seem to be exploring and celebrating, like you were saying, Michael, is the intimacy, the grey areas, the undefined space of friendship, because I think more and more, you know, if we have more and more people who are, you know, later in life single again or lost a long-term partner, and what's that terrible term, back on the market, you know, that dreadful sounds like a cattle yard. And so we need to, as we evolve, we need our fiction needs to explore these undefined connections. And I think it's good to kind of sometimes just not define them. You know, we don't always have to have a clear kind of boundary. And that's, I agree, Michael. I find those connections, those unexpected understandings between people really fascinating, because especially the ones that don't fit anywhere.
Yep. So speaking of characters who are midlife, and I come back to Fleabag because I just love that show so much. So where was your aim for that character?
So in Never Look Desperate, so I have three central characters. So I have so Goldie is 70 and recently a widow, and she behaves very badly.
Excellent.
She's actually quite rude, and it worries me that I loved writing her.
No, wonderful.
I had the best time, and then I'd be saying, you know, it's fiction. And but then we also find out that she had very, very, very cruel periods in her younger years. But I also didn't want that to be an excuse, because I think sometimes in books that becomes that, well, you know, this happens, so we should forgive. And I think sometimes we can understand, but we don't have to accept certain behaviours. And anyway, Goldie has a son called Bernard who's 48, and she's been quite a cruel mum to him, quite critical. And poor Bernard, you know, he doesn't have a lot of luck with women. He'd lost his wife Sylvia years before, and there's a kind of a reference in the book that he really only married her because she was someone who loved him. You know, they didn't. It wasn't a real match, but And then there's also Min, who is 54, and she has a background. Her family has a history as Vietnamese immigrants who came here by boat. She lost her father. She was on one of those boats, and she and Bernard sort of meet online. And there's everyone's tangled up in kind of grief, and it's all a bit chaotic because Bernard is blaming his mother for the death of the father because the father, Marvin, had a heart condition, and Goldie, who was into natural therapies, replaced Marvin's heart tablets with fish oil.
Oh.
And he was found hanging over the lawnmower on the front lawn. And so that's the immediate kind of tension.
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone in this story is kind of really wanting to connect, but kind of also fatigued by, the cycle of, difficult relationships that don't work, never feeling heard, feeling that they don't have a place in this mad kind of world of what social media kind of introduces to people, feeling too afraid to say how they feel. And Min has never had children, and she feels that label on her, and yet she's an interesting woman, and she contributes to the world in many ways that I don't think is celebrated by women, by people who look at women sometimes in that way. Yeah. So there's just a sense of where's my place in the world, and how do I find it?
Which I think is really important in having those novels out there and bringing attention to it seems to be that women, when at a certain age, become invisible. It's the children have moved on, and all their friends were because of parents of children, so therefore they've all gone, and now they're suddenly on their own. And if they're widowed or in a broken partnership or whatever the case might be, there is very much a feeling of they're invisible. There's point to them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right. And
yeah,
a lot of people, and what's ironic is that one of the biggest growing users of online dating apps are people 60 and up.
Oh.
And the biggest group of world travelers are single women 50 and up. And so, again, I'm thinking about what Michael's exploring, there are many books that are coming out that are giving this voice, that are saying, just because someone is an older person, it doesn't mean that they don't still want to connect and have intimacy. And I mean, I have a sex scene that involves someone scratching their face on a salt lamp. I don't think it's too much. It's Goldie's lover. It's got a younger lover. People are appalled by, and he gets a bit enthusiastic, and she shoves him, and there's an incident with the salt lamp. Anyway,
I'm just going to turn my salt lamps off.
It's a warning to everybody.
It's a warning that I've got one just down here. Rachel, I'm reading a book, and I'd have to look up who the author is. It's out on the kitchen bench. It's called Invisible Women, the data gap about women in the world. It is absolutely fascinating because the average person used in all the research, of course, is a male 25 to 35 of a certain height, of a certain weight, of a certain fitness. And the data gap means that women are far more likely, for example, to have serious accidents in cars because the seatbelts and the airbags are not designed for them. They're not tested for women who are pregnant. So, we are far more likely as women to do that because we're shorter,
so we have to sit closer.
We have a lot more fat up, in our body, so the seatbelts don't do the job. But it's around, representation in all sorts of industries. And it's not, as this woman points out, not intentional, but the fact is that manufacturing and history and all those things were often designed by men or they're at work sitting around a table going, oh, well, this is how I go to work and I'll do this. So anyway, I could go on, but I'm really pleased that both of you have stories where an older woman, as an older woman, I'm just going to say, I really
No.
appreciate being seen in your novels as having a life, because it's quite interesting, you know.
And having a sex life.
Yeah.
having a sex
Yeah.
life, yes,
And as
you know.
as you say, Michael, with her really rediscovering who she is as a person, like that's that journey, and it's so valuable to see more and more of that come out in forms that
Yeah,
we can
'cause
read and enjoy.
she would have been, I was just trying to work it out, she, in the late 80s, she would have been in her late 50s. So I am inhabiting a woman in her late 50s, same age as me. And also, but in her early life, she was defined by her sexuality. Unfortunately, in my book, there are no sex scenes, but she probably is glad that there aren't, because she always very much defined, her career was built on this super sexy image. And my book explores that her true self, she always wanted to write, and she always wanted her intellectual life to be revealed to the world. And a lot of my research was reading some of her, they were never published, her poems and her letters, but subsequently were published in an anthology that I was very influential on my book, and I discovered that she had an amazing voice, writerly voice, and I try and capture that in my book. And it's her interior life that I'm really drawn to, and I loved inhabiting. And I'm not sure whether a white male writer is allowed to do that, but I just loved inhabiting her world. And it was a world very much that she has forged and built over the edifice of this former life that she is all very well known for. And yeah, it was an absolute joy. And yeah, bring it on. And late, and it does celebrate being late, you know, not only being late for work or late for a film shoot, but being late, discovering yourself late in life.
Yeah.
But sometimes the best things, you know, if you look at an artist's career or a writer or a recording artist's career, what they produce in their later life, I think is so much different to their earlier bodies of work. It might be a sort of rougher, more kind of personal gesturing or whatever. And I think it is a celebration of that, of being late in that sense of the word too. Yeah, where maybe your eyesight isn't so good or your hearing isn't so good, but things are a bit more intense and rough and visceral, and so it's a celebration of that as well.
That's fantastic.
Excellent.
And
All
so
right,
I just find it, can I just say something about Michael's book? Because I find it interesting too, Michael, that it sounds like you're also contesting ideas about beauty and particularly as we age. And you know, the more this kind of social media Kardashian kind of world kind of swirls around us, I think the more confronting it is, even, you know, even though people will switch off from it or try to detach from it, those messages are just intensifying, you know, about what is, you know, what is desirable, or what makes a human kind of, you know, worthy of being in an intimate relationship, or what's attractive, or you know, our basic ideas. So it sounds like you're also challenging that, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah.
It is indeed. Now we have just a few minutes left, and I'm just going to switch our beautiful deep conversation to just a couple of really practical things, because this is, people always love to know, where do you write and when do you write? So Rachel, where do you write and when do you
want
write?
the real answer?
Yes.
Yes, don't lie to us. You just said honesty and vulnerability, so come on. Out with it.
We want the truth.
Okay, so so because like Michael, like most of us, I don't get to write every day because there's a lot going on in my life. And so in the past, I have booked myself into like a hotel for like a break on between classes at uni, or I actually, so I need to be in a really quiet place where I will shut myself away from everybody, but not everybody has the, the luxury of doing that. So, but I don't know about you, Michael, but I find I've become a bit more adaptable. As long as I've got my laptop and I can put headphones on, that's, I can sort of work in different places in a bus stop.
And are you early morning, late, any time of the day, whenever the minutes are available?
I'll do these big marathons, where I remember one week in a hotel, I wrote about 18,000 words.
Wow.
And I mean, they were rough, they were really rough, but and that was sort of around the clock. But I'm definitely a night person, which is annoying. I think. I mean, I don't know if both of you as well have very active minds at night, because you're creative people too.
Yep.
So.
Yes, we should have chatted at 4 o'clock in the morning. Michael, I have some of my best ideas, but I do keep a book by the bed. Michael, tell us,
Yes.
where and when do you write?
Yes, so I'm probably slightly different. I'm probably more a morning person, and at night I'm a bit sort of, my mind goes to mush. But I love the idea of a hotel. And what I did, to get late finished, I booked myself into Verona, the writing house up in the Blue Mountains, and it was wonderful. So when you go up there, you're surrounded by other writers, and you can just lock yourself away, be as social or as unsocial as you want to be. Because I was the only male writer there, they put me out in the garden, studio, which was my favourite. Eleanor Dark used to write, because it's her house.
Oh, wow.
A famous novelist, and she gave the house to the nation as a writer's retreat. And so it was like a hotel, and you have a cook come in to prepare your dinner.
Wow.
It was just brilliant. And so I took all my holidays at Art Monthly. I was owed quite a few weeks, so I took 4 weeks holiday, and I got the book finished in that time.
Wow.
That's amazing.
No interruptions. And
Wow.
but for instance, I've just been writing a short story which was set sort of outside of Sydney, and I was constantly catching ferries and buses, and I just found myself writing little bits of it into my iPhone. I think that's something where you're a shorter piece, you can probably just quickly capture things on your phone. And I do take lots of photos. My writing is quite visual, so I do take lots of photos, and that's as big a part of my writing process as writing sometimes. And of course, all the reading that you have to do, that goes without saying. But
Good, thank you.
That's fantastic.
The other question, of course, that people always want to know, Laurie, is pantser or plotter?
Yes.
Is the story complete in your head, or does it pour out as in verbal torrents and you shape it later, or a bit of both? Rachel.
I've never had a plan for any of my novels, and I never plan the first draft.
Love to hear it. Love to hear
and
it.
I'm a big, I love, because I think a lot of stories are already sort of in the background. And I think sometimes if you over plan, that left part of your brain will kill that creativity, because it's so critical. I mean, you need it once you've got your story down. But I also think that a lot of these people that kind of come forth are already kind of cooking away, and ready to go. So I'm definitely more it's a great term, pantser.
Pantser. Seat of your pants. Yes.
And Michael?
Oh, yeah, I think each book's been slightly different. The last one, Late, did come out very quickly in a bit of a torrent. The other two were a bit more agonisingly slow. It was like being in quicksand sometimes. But when I was up at Verona working on Late, there's a mentor up there that you can, show some of your chapters to. And she told me, Carol, she was really wonderful. She said, just, if you have any trouble, just take your characters out for a walk, and just you're up in the Blue Mountains in these beautiful streets, and just walk and talk to them, and just pretend you're in a conversation with them. And I thought that was really good advice too. Although the neighbours around Verona must think they're
a lot of weirdos out in the bush today. Must be a class on.
Yeah.
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 So, what about advice for new writers? So, what's the best advice that you were given when you really started off, or maybe between books, Rachel?
I always remember I had a teacher, Olga Lorenzo, who sadly passed away a few years ago. She was here at RMIT, and she was very, she was very much a fan of like people just being very authentic. And I remember one time I went to her and I said, everyone's writing about these sort of existential, journeys to Europe. And I said, and my first book, Vinyl Side, is set in a caravan park. So, and she said, stop thinking about everyone else and just write from inside out. And so that has stayed with me, and it's something that I often share with students. And so I think, and part of allowing the first draft to be loose allows the space for your true self, the essence of everything that you want to kind of get down and just let it out. It's kind of liberating, and then you can sort of play with that, so yeah.
Good
Michael?
advice.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, well, I'm still probably waiting for that advice myself. I do think failure and rejection is a big part of a writer's life. Envy, some of those more negative emotions you can encounter in a kind of a lonely and isolated existence. Learning to deal with those kind of emotions and actually, without being Pollyanna-ish, turning rejection and failure into to use it and as grist for your writing, and because those cliches about getting rejection letters, that the only thing that's not true is you actually don't get letters anymore. They're often just an email, Laura.
It's an email.
Or nothing.
Oh, no, crickets.
or silence even.
Yeah.
So I think dealing with those sort of things, and just I guess you develop a thick skin, but you want to keep a thin skin for the things that are important, which is your writing, I guess. But it isn't an easy life.
No, and it's also, I think too, that people forget it's a craft. You often hear people say, oh, I've got this book I've been meaning to write, as though they can just go and watch something on YouTube and they'll be fine. But it's a lifelong craft. So I would also encourage people to look at short courses. Courses within vocational education are very good because they're very hands-on, and be around other people and learn the craft, and then then that gets your confidence up and opens up all sorts of opportunities.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Very good advice. Where can people, sorry Michael, go ahead.
Oh, that's so true. No, I was just concurring.
I won't admit to it the number of courses that me and the Australian Writers Centre and the Victorian. Anyway, let's move on. Every state has a great Writers Centre. Where you can drop in for a couple of hours a day, a weekend. Lots of places, as well as Australian Writers Centre and those kind of things. Libraries, lots of authors run writing workshops, and if you're dead serious, get yourselves into colleges or universities and take some time to do that. In the meantime, where can we find you online? Even though we're going to say that social media is not everything these days, we need a presence. So Rachel, the best spot to find you and your work?
Well, I have sort of hired someone to help me with my social media, because it's like another job. So so they can find me, Rachel Matthews Author, on Facebook, Rachel Matthews Author in Instagram, my website, rachelmatthewsauthor.com, and you can also see where my workshops are running if anybody wants to come along. Some of them are, when they're run through libraries, they're free events, and some of the bookshops have wine.
Whoa, love it.
I'm in.
Just at these cold autumn evenings.
Yes.
Michael, what about yourself?
I'm fairly scarce on
You
social
certainly
media.
are. It was very hard to find you. Research
The mystery.
Mystery man.
But I am on Instagram. I'm mf.novelist on Instagram. So Rachel and I follow each other. And what I love about Instagram is it's what I've been doing recently. I've just been posting images, some of my sort of research images that I
wow.
use in writing scenes, and then I just will do a little kind of lift a quote out of my book and just but it's just a way of sort of I suppose communicating that aspect of my writing, and I like it that you're just dealing with images, but you're still dealing with the whole weird algorithms and stuff. But
It's true.
we know and love. But
Yeah.
I really enjoy Instagram, and I've never really delved into the world of Twitter or X or Facebook.
The dark world.
Probably
Dark
good,
world.
good thing.
Well, yes. Laurie and I are twins from
Yes.
way back.
Yes.
But you know, we're hanging in there. But yeah, we'll
Yeah,
just leave that alone.
Yeah.
So
So listeners
thank-
can also, if they go to the Transit Lounge website, there's a lot of
Yes, of course.
information there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Michael feels like I do that Transit Lounge are a wonderful publishing house that are really evolved, and they're great to work for, you know, as authors.
Yeah, for sure. And look, they're certainly very helpful, and they're very good at promoting their authors as well, which is fantastic.
Yes.
You don't always get that, you know. So dare I say, we're at the end of our time, and
believe
we
it.
say thank you to our listeners. Please have a listen and a read of Late
Yes.
by Michael Fitzgerald, and Have Never Looked
And-
Desperate, at least by Rachel, and you'll find those on the Australian Book Lovers website under the contemporary genre, but their other books, of course, are out and about in the world. And our byline, Rachel and Michael, in case you don't know it, is to read more Aussie books. So we're just going to ask you to bring that together with us, and please remember to read
more
more Aussie
Aussie books.
That's lovely. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
and
you very
we
much
will
for your
say
time.
It has been incredible. Thank you
Absolute
for
pleasure.
your generous
Yep.
contribution. It's great. All right.
Yeah.
Keep writing.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you for what you're doing for the community as well. Yeah,
Thank you.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah, it's
I'm going to
wonderful.
read your book, Michael.
See, you made a sale tonight already.
Yeah, Michael, you made $3 tonight.
That's it.
Won't quite pay for my coffee tomorrow.
Half a copy.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Yep.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Okay, thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Bye. Bye.
Australian Book Lovers acknowledges First Nations peoples and recognises their continuous connection to country, community and to culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and honour the sharing of traditional stories passed down through generations. We're committed to a safe and inclusive welcome for authors and readers of all cultures and backgrounds, including people of LGBTQIA+ communities and their families.
Let's meet again. Where magic happens.